welcome to my first podcast ever. What better way to kick things off than bring in a professional podcaster to tell me everything that I'm doing wrong? So I think we spent the last 14 minutes going through like, okay, you're going to do this. We're going to talk about this. We're going to do, all right, I think I got it. But thank you. Thank you for joining us. So Blythe Brumleve is the CEO of Brumleve Brands. And so to kind of break the ice, why don't you tell us what your most memorable adventure you've ever had was?
It's probably definitely my first trip out of the country. I was a little bit later in life when I finally was able to afford traveling. And my first international country that I visited was a country that I've dreamed about going to since I was a little girl, to see Machu Picchu, and that was Peru. So it was the first time like experiencing like English not being the dominant language, trying to navigate a foreign country with not English not being that first language, being incredibly thankful for anybody else who learned English so they could communicate with me. But just being able to see these historical figures and these historical places that have been around for thousands of years, it just created a part of me, or I guess instilled a part of me that is, you're so much more than just the little day-to-day interactions, the email overload and, too much screen time. And it was just that taking me back to almost like the nature part. And because it wasn't just Machu Picchu, like Peru is just such a very diverse country. They have deserts on top of mountains, then they have the Amazon rainforest.
So the first thing that comes to mind for me is all the deadly animals. Like when you say rainforest, I'm like poisonous frogs, huge wasps, snakes that are twice my size.
All valid concerns.
I'm like, okay. So I studied abroad when I was in college and I went to Australia, and my thought process was like, I want to go somewhere they speak English. But I was willing to give up English for the top 10 deadliest animals in the world. So when I think about traveling, I'm like, all right, so what deadly creatures are we working with there?
Well,
so did you see anything there?
Well, you saw a bunch of, obviously with being in the rainforest, you see a bunch, but there are two parts of the rainforest for folks who may not know. There's like the upper basin and the lower basin. The lower basin is where the more dangerous things are at. You have to get a lot of shots in order to, malaria shots and things like that in order to go to the lower basin. We did not do that. We went to the upper basin. So we stayed in like hotels with air conditioning
and things like that. When you're like, get your malaria shot.
Well, I will say it was very interesting because there was one place that we stayed at that had, sort of a window unit, air conditioning. It was almost like a hut in the middle of the rainforest. There were native tribes that were around. So you would wake up in the morning to go and hike around this little area, and you would see like human footprints. And so that, somebody from one of the local tribes was, nomadic tribes was walking around in the rainforest at night. And you're like, oh, that's so cool. I'm like, that's so cool. Like, and
not hunting people.
Well, a lot of them are they very much still live like a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So they're using the forest to get their nutrients. So a lot of like Brazilian nuts that fall from the trees.
Are you guys welcome there? I know in Australia the Aboriginals really did not like us there.
Oh, really? Everybody that we met in Peru was super nice, super welcoming. They were very excited to sort of, share their way of life and their culture. And, from everyone from the big city of like a Cusco or Lima, which are like the bigger cities that you would fly into, and then to the rainforest. It was just the most amazing experience. Also from just like a food perspective in Peru, I think it was rated like 3 out of 5 times as the best country for food. So their food was
I like food.
Yeah.
I like food. That sounds great. That's cool.
And there was a lot of, like, because they're such high elevation in that country, the fruit that grows there is juicier, it's sweeter, and so they like a lot of, like, juices,
Not in the
ceviche.
lower basin, you gotta go
Yeah.
to the upper basin.
We
That's
were
where
in
the
the upper
food is
basin
juicy.
area, so
Yes.
that part of the country,
Nice.
but I still think about that I took that trip in 2019, and I still think about that country at least once a week. I actually, I'm sipping out of a coffee mug from Peru, like
I actually think I saw you something or I saw you post something on, LinkedIn the other day about taking that trip, and it's like a picture of you, like, with your arms out there. That's
oh,
really
yeah,
cool.
that was in there's no, greater rain than, like, Amazon rainforest rain. You
Yeah,
can hear it coming, and you have to drop your stuff and cover yourself in, like, a rain jacket or a poncho that might help, but it was just I'm a Floridian, so I know, like, a good
yeah.
rainfall. That was unlike I've never experienced, but it was also beautiful in that moment too, because 'cause you're just surrounded by just nature,
Are you
and
planning your next trip back or planning a different trip?
I would love to go
No.
back, but I know that our next trip is probably gonna be Japan. My brother just got back from
Mhm.
Japan, and he just raved about it. That was his first, international trip out of the
Yeah,
country, and so I think Japan for him was what Peru was to me, and so we're excited to go there next. Plus, we just got done watching Shogun, which is one of the best television shows I've ever seen,
I haven't even heard of
and
that. What's that on?
it's, on Hulu and FX, I
Okay.
believe. But it follows, like, back in the day with, like, all these Japanese, different warring tribes and, I guess Toranaga was this one sort of general type or type persona, and he was, just like a mastermind of trying to save Japan from, having these, like, civil wars break out and things like that.
Yeah,
The writing is fantastic, the costumes, the on-set locations, so that watching that show just cemented the fact that we really wanna go to
I gotta
Japan
go.
and
I gotta go.
check it
Yeah.
out.
I think, my next trip, I wanna go to I really wanna go to Ireland.
Mm,
I really wanna go to Ireland.
there's a lot of
So
castles, the scenery there is
yeah, the
beautiful.
scenery, the banks, like, everything just looks gorgeous, and I hear the people are awesome, and I'd love to check out some of those, like, pubs.
Yes, like the Guinness
Just
pub, like
drink
the
with some
original
of the
Guinness pub that's
locals.
there.
Yeah, like, that would be really cool, like, cobblestone roads.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, CEO of Brumleve brands. All right. So we see like tons of brands going by, like digital dispatch, everything logistics. What is the setup over there?
So I pretty much started Brumleve Brands about 6 years ago. I think it's 6 years ago. Um, because I went out on my own so I was working at a 3PL, an asset-based 3PL. I had worked for them for years, and it was time for me to start my own company. So my former mentor kind of he said, "It's time for me to push you out of the nest," and
Bye.
he
Time to fly.
did. And so I started my
Bye,
own
Paul.
company. I started Brumley Brands. They were my first customer, and it was one of those moments that when you first go out on your own, it's what I'm gonna take a check from anybody because I don't know where my next check is coming from.
Right. What
Uh,
do I gotta do?
right. I was doing work with like home builders and construction companies, and of course logistics companies too, because that's what I knew. But then it just got to the point where it's like, okay, I am a small team. I need to focus, and why not focus in the areas that I've or in the industry that I've worked at for the last 10 years. I mean, yeah, we're on the freight marketing podcast here. And so with that, you know that freight marketing has a long way to go,
Yeah.
and that's where I saw a really big opportunity is like, well, this is what I've been working in and this is my skill set. So why not just start a company and be able to focus in on that niche? So it took, about 6 months after launching the business, realizing I really need to niche down. And it
Yeah.
sounds crazy calling logistics a niche because it's
It's a
so
big one.
massive.
It's a big one.
Big
It's a
niche.
big niche. That's why I'm okay with it too. I'm like, we serve transportation logistics. And it's like, it might sound like a niche, but it's like there's this whole supply chain ecosystem that we can support.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in this space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so after I started that company and that's where it really because I wanted Brumley Brands to be a company that I could have almost like different fishing lines in the water. That's kind of the way I saw it, and that I could have this umbrella company that fits under these other brands underneath it, hence the name Brumleve Brands, and
Yeah.
then those can have a specific market focus. And so Brumleve Brands is really just the operating entity, and
Mhm.
then underneath that is Digital Dispatch. And so with Digital Dispatch, I started off like being a marketing agency and doing everything for everyone, but I realized very quickly that I hated most of the work.
I
I
don't enjoy
hated
this.
managing social media for other companies. I hated managing, because it was very challenging for me to do social media for other companies in a way where it would be creative if they weren't going to invest in someone within the company
I think you gotta
making
have a
that
whole,
long
like,
form content.
content or campaign plan, right? And then support is one of those channels or support. Social is one of those channels that can support the campaign. It's like,
Yes.
okay, we're gonna have this pillar content. We're gonna spin out this webinar. We're gonna do this podcast. We're gonna share it all on social, just like we're gonna share it in email. So it's really hard to do like a social calendar if you're not developing content to support it. And you want to
100%.
be unique, fresh, engaging, and not just talk about yourself. Like social medias intend to be social.
Right. And for a lot of companies, they really think that if they don't provide that, you're really putting handcuffs on the team who is trying to do their best and trying to promote you. So
Yeah.
I decided, okay, if you're not going to actively be out there creating content and creating that pillar content, then I'm just going to focus on your website. And so that's
Yeah.
where, through the years, I've sort of drilled down into I'm really good at website management. I'm really good at figuring out like how to structure a website to best fit your goals. And so that's my sweet spot now. And so that's where I really hone in on. And then I had a podcast to talk to my clients with Digital Dispatch to figure out what their pain points are, to figure out where they were struggling. And the podcast just kind of took off
Yeah.
and became like I got picked up by FreightWaves. I did a very similar show called Cyberly on FreightWaves for about 2 years. And then it came to a point where my contract ended with them. And it was like, okay, this is all right. This is the time. Like the show has evolved into more than just a way to talk to my clients for Digital Dispatch. And so earlier this year, it's so painful, but I separated the brands fully. So everything is logistics, is its own brand, its own entity now, and the Digital Dispatch is really just the website management focus. And so that way, hopefully, there's not a lot of confusion because I felt the confusion myself, and so I know if I felt the confusion myself, then my audience was feeling that as well. And so
Well,
that
I
was
had
the
that
main.
too. Like when I was setting this up, like it was like, is Freight Marketing Gurus its own separate thing? Or is it Virago Marketing's podcast?
Mm.
And so Lisa Otter, you know her through TMSA on my team, as well as we partner together on websites. For anybody that doesn't know, we partner to build really good websites, and we've got quite a few under our belt now, like five.
Yeah, I
Five.
think we have 3 that have launched already, and then 2 more on the way.
Yep. Yep. And so I was talking to her and she's like, well, shouldn't we brand it for Virago Marketing? Because I was like, I was over here in Greenland, like, like, oh, look at this pretty green. Like, this is nice. But it's like, I don't know. Do you bring the brands together or do you separate them? So for me, it made sense to bring the brands together and
Mm.
this to be Virago Marketing's side gig for like a podcast. But everything logistics is not intended to necessarily support Digital Dispatch today. Like Digital Dispatch is doing the websites, and everything logistics is talking to everybody in
Yes,
logistics about what's going on. So
exactly.
yours kind of
But
spun off in a different way. But that was a surprise to you because
yeah,
you were talking to your clients, finding out pain
yeah,
points.
it got picked up pretty quickly. I think within 2 months of launching the show, FreightWaves was like, "We want you to do that same show, but
Oh,
we want you to do it over here." And so that was a really sweet gig for me to
yeah.
be able to take the show that I was already creating and just have access to a team. And that's what I loved most about working for FreightWaves for a couple years is that you had access to additional like motion graphics editors and a producer that could talk in your ear and other people who are going to edit the show and upload it and make it look all nice and pretty. And that was fantastic. And then it just got to the point where it kind of ran its course.
Yeah.
And then they pretty much told me, they said, well, you can keep doing your show on here. And I was like, well, think I can get paid for this. And so that's where the opportunities started to arise, where it was, sponsorships started reaching out to me, especially because I was independent,
Right.
or I became independent. So they wanted to start partnering with me. And that it really shifted the tone of the show itself, where now the podcast can treat Digital Dispatch as a sponsor of the
Yeah.
show, where I can put in my plugs for that specific brand offering, and then maybe future brand offerings for any other brand that comes under the umbrella. And so
Yes.
I'm really passionate about this
Interesting.
framework and
Yeah.
how it could feed the future.
What's really interesting is you were on the forefront of podcasts in this industry. And so you brought in this kind of different type of content that like a lot of people weren't doing. Who was doing it in this space when you came in? Do you know?
I do. So there Sarah Barnes Humphrey for sure. So there
Uh,
wasn't that many of us. Sarah Barnes
Yeah.
Humphrey, she's been with Let's Talk Supply Chain. She has been probably I guess the most influential leader in podcasting in general within
Mhm.
all of supply chain. Also Sherry Heinisch. She's supply chain queen. So those were the two, and women, go figure. That was awesome to be able to watch and see. I know that there was a couple of other, sort of supply chain focused shows, but no one was really, there was only a handful of companies that were doing it in logistics focused areas. But it really started booming during the COVID lockdowns. And so
Right.
that's, I think, where people were looking for community and things like that. So a lot of podcasts, Chris Jolly, Trade Griggs, even a lot of FreightWaves content they expanded and pivoted to online. Even though they had shows like What the Truck before, and prior to that, it was during the COVID lockdowns that I think podcasting and logistics in particular really just saw I say an explosion. So we
It
went from like 5 podcasters to like 60. And I was like,
Well,
wow, that's crazy.
I went to Matt's and I'm walking the floor and there's just podcasts set up everywhere. And
That's
like
awesome.
TCA, there's podcasts set up. I'm sure there were some at TIA. I didn't go to that one. But definitely at Manifest, there were podcasts everywhere. And like for them, I know there's a lot of drivers there and they're kind of listening on like Sirius XM and stuff like that. Um, but just kind of setting up and running the show at the shows, there's so many. Like everybody's got a podcast. I'm like, I'm gonna jump on board. Let's do it.
Well, that's what it feels like from just the walking the show floor, looking maybe on social media. But the reality is that over 90% of podcasts never make it past 10 episodes. And so
Oh,
the start and fail rate is very high, because I think people have unrealistic expectations when they start a show. They think that they're going to get hundreds of thousands of listeners. They're going to get sponsors off from the jump. That's not how this works. I have been a podcaster since 2014, and I have covered a
still working
variety
on
of
it.
industries. So
Still trying to get there.
it's one of those, like, I've seen a lot of shows come and go. And the thing with this is that it is such a blessing to be able to do a role that you can get better at in public. And
Mhm.
it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because you can go back and look at, all of my old content that I posted on YouTube, or even, podcast episodes from years back. They're awful. They're so terrible. But much like any other profession, the
You
more
gotta
you
start
do it,
somewhere.
you
Yeah,
gotta get the reps.
you gotta start somewhere. Yeah. So, how do you personalize your inbound marketing efforts to target specific audiences without overwhelming them with like too much content? So, like when you're doing these podcasts, like how do you make sure that like you're not blasting them too much when you do your scheduling, when you figure out, like you said, they don't even make it to 10 episodes, but like, do you like plan, like, do you do seasons?
No, so we
Okay.
publish 2 episodes every single week. I've never done a season
2
before, but
episodes
that
a
sounds
week.
nice.
Never did a what, season?
Yeah, like seasons where so typically when you do a season, you are it and depends on the style, but, like a narrative style podcast takes a tremendous amount of work. Sometimes upwards of a year of research and writing, interviewing several guests, and then being able to tell the story in an audio
Okay, you're
format.
just scaring
I'm
me.
not doing that.
You're
I'm
just
not doing
scaring
that.
me.
We're not doing that
I've got
here.
9 scheduled, that's it. We didn't make it to 10. We didn't make it to 10. I did one with Blythe and she scared me, I'm out.
Well, Well, no, I see it as I see podcasting as the pivotal point of our business and where we invest a ton of time and energy into, and budget and resources too, which I think is
Yeah.
kind of all the same things. But the way that I think about podcasting is you got to think about the distribution first, where you're going to send it to. What is it? Email? Is it social? Is it both? Are you going to send out the
I
same
know.
message multiple times? I'm frankly a fan of carpet bombing social media with your content.
Okay.
And that sounds like a kind of an aggressive phrase for it, but a
Carpet
year
bombing.
ago,
Where did you pick up that term? Like carpet bombing? Did you just make that up?
no, it's actually like a war phrase
Okay. I'm like carpet bombing. All right.
where
I'm gonna
you
change
just,
the
I mean,
title
you
of this
basically
podcast.
just see it as like dropping a bunch of bombs on all of different social media channels. And I don't recommend this to other companies, by the way.
Okay.
We have a system, we have processes, we have people
Yes.
that are in place. I have a content remixer and I have a YouTube and a podcast editor. And so being able to now use those resources, remember I talked about having access to a team at FreightWaves. I didn't have access to that team at first, but now I do. I'm in that position where, we had the revenue to justify making that spend into
Right.
these specific use cases that make a ton of sense for the podcast itself. Because if you're not going to distribute it properly, then there's really no sense in even doing it. Because podcasts in general, it's very tough to get discovered.
Nobody's
It's
gonna listen to me on Spotify? Like, I'm not gonna get 500 subscribers tonight?
not instantly, no, but that's a pathway to get there, and that starts with recording your first episode.
Here we are.
So, getting that and setting that process up. So we send out one email a week. We use
Okay.
MailChimp in order to send it out. We have a template that we reuse and tweak. So we keep most of the framework the same.
Is it for, like, people who subscribe to receive the email from you?
Yes.
So how do
So
you get that list?
I have a sign up form on all of my sites. So on Digital Dispatch, we were building that list for a little while, and then when we launched the Everything is Logistics site, we took the forms off of Digital Dispatch for the
Mhm.
newsletter. Unless it's like freight marketing, sales, website related, we keep that one there for the Digital Dispatch because it makes sense for that brand. Now, for Everything is Logistics, we just have a main sort of like catch all form, but we also in our forms we have a source URL. And that source URL can tell me the URL that that person signed up for the email from. And that is a tremendous data point for me because then I'm able to go in
Now
and I
you know
see,
where they
okay, that was a trucking related article. Maybe they want more trucking related episodes. And so
okay.
setting up this framework of being able to collect the data and then analyze the data, and then what that next phase looks like now that the new site is launched is getting additional landing pages specifically geared around topic clusters or topic categories. And
Yep.
so those topic categories can be, freight tech, it can be AI. One of our first ones was women in logistics. So we took all of episodes from interviews with other women and we collected them and we put them into a single podcast player, put them on a single landing page. And now that page is one of our top pages on the Everything is
Oh.
Logistics site.
Oh, very cool.
So the idea, the next phase of it, like what that, I guess, email marketing, social media 2.0 looks for us is that taking these different content clusters and making different campaigns around those that we can pump out to social media so we can email out to people, but also to your point, not overload them. I want to send more targeted emails based on what you're interested in or what you've shown interest in. I
Right.
don't want to overload them on email. Now, social media, it's a different strategy because you're dealing with algorithms. You're dealing with maybe your content shows up in other people's feeds and maybe it doesn't. One of the
You get a
best.
lot of feedback through social media because I would imagine, a lot of comments and like, "Hey, Blythe, you should do a cover on this or cover this story," or "We'd love to see more on trucking." Like, is that also a listening tool for you?
Yes. So we also collect those responses on the website as well. So I have a system for collecting those different ideas and plugging it into a show ideas folder. And so that show
Mm.
ideas folder, typically once a month, I will go through all of those different ideas. And so on a daily basis, if I'm seeing, somebody else's content or somebody else's really good, point that they made, I will save it. I'll bookmark it. And then my once a month, when I'm thinking about what I want to talk about in the next couple of months, then that helps me break down, okay, these are the topics that are resonating the most. These are the ones that people want us to talk about. And then who can I find that's a good guest that can complement both of those things? So I think about it from a very strategic standpoint now. I can tell you though that
Well, sounds like you have an editorial calendar, just like a industry publication would, right? And they're like,
yes.
okay, we need somebody to help tell this story. And then you go seek people who can help tell that story and invite them to come on. Okay. Because my method right now is, you're really cool. You talk about cool stuff in this area. Let's bring that on.
Very valid. And I still use that. No. I think that is a very valid tool, as a very valid method that I still use today too. But where I've discovered, and where it's a little challenging now that the podcast has grown, it's
how many subscribers do you have now?
Well, we hit 100,000 downloads,
Wow.
about October of last year. And so that was a major milestone for us for the podcast perspective. Now we're really focused on, sort of YouTube growth. So we create a video version of the show as well. And YouTube is great because it allows for greater discoverability. Now, the biggest issue with podcasting is that you mostly hear about it as word of mouth or through social channels or email distribution. With YouTube, if somebody engages with, say like Sal Mercogliano, who is the host of What's Going On with Shipping, I believe he has the most subscribers, non-trucker related subscribers in all of logistics. So his show is just incredible. But because I've had him on previously, I'm hoping that in YouTube, when people are on there and they find a topic or they find him that they really like,
search for him and find me.
Yes, exactly. So it's kind of like, really it's taking advantage of YouTube's recommendation algorithm, where the majority of your views are going to come from the recommendations. The majority of your views in general on YouTube come from people who are not subscribed to you. So that YouTube and that whole ecosystem has been a conscious effort of ours since earlier this year to grow it and really start hammering it home. So we publish YouTube Shorts now regularly to that channel in order to grow the long form content. So I kind of see it, I guess, to go for like another war analogy.
Carpet bombing.
So carpet bombing, and then also like a content drug dealer. Like you want to drop little nuggets of information, content. That's kind of the way I see it, is drop those little information nuggets, get them addicted to the content, and then have them come and become a subscriber, become a follower.
I gotta be honest, I was actually scared of launching a podcast because of the editing. But it seems like, like StreamYard is a very easy tool to use, Canva, CapCut, and now you can find a lot of, I think you call them content mixers. Is that what? Well, yeah, they'll just give you a whole bunch of variations to go on social media and YouTube and shorts and whatnot.
Which sounds good in theory. So what we're kind of managing through right now is a lot of these AI tools are fantastic at the surface level. Like, oh, great, I can take this StreamYard link, I can take this YouTube link, I can plug it in a tool like Opus, and it's going to spit out 20 different clips, and I can upload all of those to social media, and then boom, I'm done. It's not exactly that easy. I wish it was that easy. Maybe the technology, it looks like it's getting closer and closer where you could kind of have that on an auto publish. Frankly, it's not there yet. So now what we're struggling with, or what we're adjusting our processes to, is that, okay, we have to find the clip that has a full thought, because it will pull in. It's interesting that it will pull in.
That doesn't make any sense. It didn't. It just did the punchline. It didn't tell the joke.
Yeah, exactly. So it's looking for the before and the after of the conversation to make it a full, complete thought. Because we're admittedly, for a lot of our clips that we've put out during this trial of these different AI tools, there's not a complete thought. And what we've also discovered is that the caption that coincides with the video clip really matters a lot. And for the majority of the people who scroll social media without the volume on, the captions being turned on the video itself, and also the description or the text of the post itself is very important.
Everything matters. Everything matters. How do you do A/B testing with that? Do you do any testing on your messaging and stuff?
No, that's a good question. We do not. On email, that is something that recently just came to my attention because I was looking through our analytics. I typically do this about once a quarter just so I'm not inundated with social media stats and,
Right.
what works well and what doesn't. It's kind of like trying to measure a bicep curl at the gym, months later. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So for my analytics, especially when it comes to email, when we have a custom, this is probably like a duh moment for most people, but the subject line is tremendously important. And we found that I was thinking in my head initially, I wanted people to have an email that's not going to overload their inbox and it's just going to be filled with tips and they can get used to seeing it in their email inbox. So let's keep the subject line the same. But when
Yeah.
I've switched the subject line, going back to that, women in logistics post that I'm talking about or that I referenced earlier, when we use that in the subject line, the open rates, the
Through the
click-throughs, dramatically increased. And so that was a signal to me that it's like, okay, we need to start playing around with these subject lines, but then that brings in a whole new variables of testing and it's a lot. It's a
You
content
can go
marketing.
down a rabbit hole. You can go down an absolute rabbit hole between all the channels that you can explore, all the editing that you can do, all the distribution, all the testing, the SEO, everything.
YouTube thumbnails, like there's
Thumbnails.
Mr.
Yeah.
Beast did a 90-minute talk at a recent conference just on thumbnails and the importance of
Oh,
the thumbnail. So all of these little things matter so much.
what tips do you have on the thumbnail? What did you learn?
So tips is never create more than 3 words or never have more than 3 words on the
In the
thumbnail
thumbnail.
itself.
Okay.
Because if you the most of the views come from the recommendations column that's kind of like off to the right hand side or it's below the video, then you want people to be able to like glance and know what the video is about. Also, the intro of the video has to match with whatever the title is and the few words that you used in your thumbnail graphic, because people have to be reassured that they clicked on the right thing and that they're going to be shown what they intended or what they thought was going to be shown when they clicked on the video originally. So we've adjusted our YouTube editing flow to include a pull quote that complements the title, that also complements the description. It's a lot.
The whole thing. There's a whole process. And now you mentioned some AI tools for podcasting. Which ones do you use? Which ones are you interested in? Which ones have you heard about? What are you thinking?
So we've actually consolidated a lot of our AI tools that we have used previously. The two that have stuck around the longest and that I don't foresee getting rid of at all is Otter AI and then also Opus Clips. Opus was founded by a couple people that used to be on the board of TikTok, so they kind of know like short form video and a lot of the tools and the features that they're continuously adding to the platform have really helped out a ton. So they're removing like filler words from the clips, which is really important in a 1 minute video to remove the uhs and the ahs and the likes and the all of those different words that you don't realize take up a lot of space in a 1 minute long clip. So Opus Clips is definitely up there for me. And then Otter AI, which is where we upload a copy of the final transcript from each episode.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind that is that we're building out our podcast library. And so we'll be able to use, an AI chatbot on top of our podcast library so that people can just pretty much like cut to the chase and
Yeah.
find out what episodes this is my in my head ideally
The plan.
what what will happen afterwards is that hopefully people will use the chatbot, have conversations with the episode. Maybe it recommends other episodes as well. Like there's different separate from a chat bot, there are website technologies and features that you can have to recommend other content. But with people engaging with content more in the social space, my framework of thinking is that they're going to discover the show in a social media feed, then they get to the website and hopefully they give the show a listen. But if they don't have the time, then hopefully they sign up for an email newsletter, or hopefully they can use the chat bot to figure out if investing in following me or subscribing to the podcast is worth it for them. And so
Right.
a lot of these things I add just as like feature enhancement for the listener. I'm always trying to think about, well, what do I use as a podcast listener? And then what would help other audience members be able to engage with the content more and frankly cut to the chase. A lot of my shows tend to be longer, and I know people, I want to be respectful of people's time. And if they just
Yeah.
want the too long didn't listen, then hopefully the chatbot
Skip
will
to this
satiate
area
them.
where we talk about this. Yeah, that'd be awesome if you could kind of search through the podcast and find the area where like, oh, they talked about AI tools for podcasting and like kind of, get that information and bounce wherever you need to go. So how do you get your subscribers? You mentioned that you use tracking URLs so you could tell where they're coming from. Spill the beans. Where are they coming from?
So they're mainly coming from social media. So LinkedIn is a big traffic source for us. So that's why we heavily invest in LinkedIn and YouTube as well. I would also say word of mouth is the biggest
Yeah.
driver, because what we do on a lot of the high converting website forums is not only are we tracking the source URL of where they signed up, but we also ask a very simple and important question: how did you hear about us? And so it's a free text field. There's no drop down, there's no check boxes, and that is by design, because
Yeah.
I want to be able to hear specifically what was the catalyst for you coming to my website and making a conversion. That's what I want to know, what the catalyst was. And so a lot of it is word of mouth. Heard you at a conference, heard my friend on this show. I think you would like this. Here's a topic I think you should be interested in. I saw your LinkedIn post. So we're able to gather up all of those different data points, and then hopefully in the future, that's what we're working on right now, we'll be able to take all of those different variations of how did you hear about us, and then plug it into greater reporting data that can give us, some of the signals of where we're making the most impact. Instagram, frankly, is not a good driver for us. We
Okay.
get little to no engagement
What about
on
TikTok?
TikTok is one that I'm still very protective over.
Okay.
I have not allowed any of our clips to be put on TikTok,
Okay.
mostly because I think it's just such a unique storytelling environment where I'm really passionate about like green screen level videos, where you can have an image or a video in the backdrop and you can kind of do the explainers. And so what looks like next for the podcast for us is to be able to take an episode and be able to condense it into a short video. Hey, these are the fun things that we learned from this episode with this person, and kind of go deep on one part of the show.
Yeah.
And then hopefully that drives people back to listen to the full show. So TikTok, I haven't quite cracked the nut yet of podcasting marketing there, because I'm one of the I don't think I'm one of the few, but I love
Well, it
that
can only be
platform.
like 3 minutes, right? Yeah, I love the entertaining stuff, but I'll be honest, I follow, like, stories, like, news headlines, like, the Riley Strain case, and I sit there with my fingers crossed they're gonna find him, everything's gonna be okay, but, yeah, I mean, TikTok is kinda like my Facebook, it's my space. It's my
Yes.
personal space where I engage with my friends and content that's not work
Oh, interesting.
related and things like that, you know?
Because I kind of see, I treated TikTok very differently, where it was, I almost felt a level of freedom because my friends and family were still using like Facebook and
Yeah.
Instagram, and they hadn't quite migrated over to TikTok yet. And so I liked TikTok because it felt like a clean slate where I could start over from a content perspective. I'm not being fed like, beauty. I am in now, but like beauty influencers and things like that on
Oh,
my
no. Now
feed.
I feel like my TikTok is nothing but a massive infomercial.
If
Like
I see
like, "Oh,
sponsored, I'm
so what am I buying
immediately
today?"
scrolling.
Yeah, so nobody knows this but me, but I'm gonna put it out there since it's my first. We didn't do any of the questions because we've kinda had some organic conversation, and we're already, flying by on time. So I'm gonna ask you to kinda share some secret sauce. I know when we first got on, I was like, "Look at you with this uplight behind you, like, the lighting in there. Do you have lighting on you? Like, give us some tips. Tell us, spill the secret sauce. We need to know what's going on."
So lighting is probably going to be, and I will preface this with, if you are starting a show, please do not think that this is, I mean, hopefully maybe you could do it, but I don't want this look of the lighting and camera equipment to be intimidating for recording your first show, because it shouldn't be. This took years of tweaking. I mean, went through all of the different, social media
This is
tweaks
where
and
you start with your printer.
just starting is the
This is
most
where you start.
difficult but most rewarding thing that you can do is just to start. And
Yeah.
then you can worry about the tweaking. The fear of perfection holds people back so much. And it goes back to the failure rate of people do 10 episodes and they think nobody's listening and they just quit and they never come back to that show. But if you're obsessed psychopath like me, you are like, I don't care if 2 people listen. Like that's 2 more people that
Yeah.
listen to my show that I technically gave a keynote to. That's the way I see it, is that I have an opportunity to give a keynote to a target audience that hopefully will care. And so I make these little tweaks, and with my lighting in particular, what you have to factor in is that I have computer screens in front of me that's giving me light here on this side of my face. So I specifically, and maybe I can show it really quick. I can't even
Yeah,
remember
show
like
us the whole room.
well, it's
We wanna see what's behind you too.
well,
Don't try to hide that one.
I just wanted to show the difference. So if you see the
Yeah.
lighting on my
Oh,
face, like
yeah.
it just changed. And so you have to
Oh,
factor in the computer light from your screen.
and
I
that's
have
your
another
screen. Okay.
what's called a key light, which the computer light helps a ton. If I didn't have that, it would be like a dark space on my face here. So I have a key light that I wish I could turn the camera to that comes this way. And so that was apparently very important from a lighting perspective, is to have a key light. And so you have that light. I have this light here. But then what my favorite part is my little purple backlight, which is very simple. It's just a little light on a tripod, and it
So is
has
that a white wall and it's just a light and it looks
so
purple?
that is how it looks without it.
Oh, it's a
But if
world
you
of difference.
added in that little, like, I think it was
Little
like 60
ambiance.
bucks for that little light and a tripod, it makes the world of difference. You can
Love
adjust the
it.
colors. You don't have to pick purple if you don't want it. You can pick other colors. I just happen to like that color, so I just
Yeah.
rolled with it. And then all the rest of this stuff is just wall stickers and wall art,
Stickers.
not live plants.
No, it's awesome. It looks really good. So eventually I'll work on this space. We'll move the printer
But
from
you
the
got
90s.
started, which is good, which is
But I'm here.
congratulations.
I'm here. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for being the very first person on my podcast, coming on and kind of sharing all the secret sauce and stuff like that. Lots of really good information about podcasting. Tell the audience where they can find you if they want to connect with you.
So they can find all of my content that I've been, sort of dishing about over on everythingislogistics.com. Hopefully it's easy for folks to spell it out. I would direct you also to brumlevebrands.com if you're interested in seeing what else we're working on. But everythingislogistics.com is probably the best place for the majority of your audience to find me on social, email, and then all of the content that we produce, YouTube and podcast format.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations again.
Thank you.